Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of 100 Names for Love, A Stroke, a Marriage, and the Language of Healing by Diane Ackerman, narrated by Barbara Mcculloh.
Part 1. The Cartography of Loss. Chapter 1. Trailing plastic tubes, Paul made his way across the room, steeped in twilight, and I was struck by how the body sometimes looks like the sea creature it is, a jellyfish with long tentacles, not really a fish at all, but a gelatinous animal full of hidden symmetries, as well as lagoons and sewers, and lots of spongy and stringy bits, but mainly salt water. Lugging tubes and cables, he had joined the hospital's bloom of deep-sea creatures. But all that would soon change, because he'd been cleared to leave the following morning, though he'd still be taking potent antibiotics. "We escape at dawn," he stage-whispered over his shoulder in a British sergeant major voice. The prospect made us both a little giddy. For 3 weeks, he'd languished in this high-tech cove with a kidney infection that had waxed systemic, one of those staph bugs older than sharks or ginkgo trees, and I'd camped out with him, lest he trip over the leashes dripping fluids into or out of him. I'd been on a book tour for An Alchemy of Mind when I learned Paul had to be hospitalized, and curtailed my travels to fly straight home. But the magic and glory of the brain was still very much on my mind, so, lounging in a visitor's chair, propped up on pillows, I passed the time browsing back issues of Cerebrum and Brain in the News. From my thermos, I poured us cups of the hot grain drink Roma, which smelled of chicory and graham crackers. After all, we'd been down this wharf before, too many times. 20 years earlier, when he was only 55 years old, Paul had battled a devastating heart arrhythmia that nearly killed him. After months of my sensing that something wasn't quite right, the jazz I heard in his chest when we curled up in bed, how pale and clammy he sometimes grew, especially after meals, I'd finally convinced him to see a doctor by insisting it was the only thing I wanted for Christmas, the gift of being able to set my mind at ease. A friend had recommended a superb and kind cardiologist in a nearby city, whose verdict was that Paul needed a pacemaker to chime in whenever his heart paused too long between beats. Otherwise, he might suddenly pass out, maybe for good, just as his father had from the same malady in his 70s. For Paul, that meant a week-long hospital stay in Syracuse, the first of many such trysts, and Paul lamenting, broken-spirited, "I used to be such a lion." When he woke up, after a 4-hour surgery, during which his heart had twice spat out a pacemaker wire, cleverly insinuated down veins and lodged in the heart muscle, I'd greeted him with my best 100-watt smile and holding a stuffed lion. Ever since that day, we'd driven the hour and a half over wintry, dimly lit roads for checkups, pacemaker tests, and echocardiograms, always anxious, then relieved, and sometimes edgy again, living a predictably uncertain life, much like the regular irregularity of his arrhythmic heart. Other medical escapades followed, like the time when routine lab work revealed a blood sugar level of 800, normal is around 100, signaling diabetes, and a new regimen began of blood sugar tests, a special diet, and 3 more pills. Or when Paul's blood pressure kept soaring, and we had to drive that glassy road to Syracuse again and again to monitor and reblend his cocktail of medicines. Or the days he fretted in the hospital in Ithaca, receiving IV antibiotics for cellulitis, an infection of his body tissue that began innocently at a small scratch on his toe, but quickly launched a dangerous campaign up his foot and leg. This time, a systemic infection was scary enough, but not as harrowing as what we'd been through before. Since the hospital was likely to be our
Sample complete. Ready to continue?